He wore all black.
All you could really see were the big whites of his wide eyes gazing at you, as if he was staring straight into your soul. I remember seeing just barely his lips moving. He was whispering something that I could not hear. Being very curious, I turned my... Number 1. There are dangerous things online. Things that will change your life forever. This world, there are dangerous things online. Things that will change your life forever. This world is a strange one. They say that we don't see most of the actual internet. That the websites pulled up by search engines don't have access to something called the dark web. It's an online underworld only accessible if you use an anonymous browser. Exploring this disturbing place without a VPN or virtual private network, you're not just risking legal troubles, you're risking your life. So I'm going to share with you some haunting dark web scary stories. Stories that will make 4chan seem family friendly. But first, have you ever had a creepy experience at Subway? I'd love to hear your story and maybe put it in a future video. Go to deathbyfear.com to share your story with me and the world. Also, stay tuned this Friday at 5 p.m. Central for a live stream. Now, let's dive into the dark web and see who or what finds us first. Number 1. My deep web experience. Submitted by 10 letters. I'm a 17-year-old guy living in South Germany, in Hessen to be exact. I live in a pretty loud neighborhood with a lot of crazy stuff going on. I don't care if you believe me or not, but I know what I experienced. One day at school, my friend, let's call him Jack, told me about the deep web. Back then, I had absolutely no idea what it was. He said you can order weed and buy illegal stuff on it. I thought that was the only thing that could be found on the deep web, but I couldn't have been more wrong. So my friend invited me over to his place so we could check it out. But considering my parents wouldn't be home that day, I said we should go to my place instead. So we did. After school, we met at my house. He told me the instructions on how to use the deep web, and I followed him closely. We downloaded the Tor browser and some free but bad VPN. When we had everything together, or so we thought, we used this search engine we found on some random wiki called Ice Rocket, and off we went. Our journey began with us looking at some weed on sale and some guns. We were exploring a lot. This was stuff I'd never seen before, so I was highly curious. But we didn't buy anything though. We clicked over to some random site, but it was completely blank. That is until the pop-ups began to show up. There were links leading to other random sites. So like an online game of Russian roulette, we simply clicked one. The site was named something like Child Experiments. Just the title alone gave me chills. I told my friend we should probably stop, or at the very least leave that site, because it just didn't sound good. But he ignored me. His curiosity was getting the better of him. He began to scroll down, and that's when we saw the pictures. Pictures of children, mutilated children. I was disgusted, more than I'd ever been in my life. I was so disturbed at that point that I told my friend that he should just go home immediately. But he still just sat there, not acknowledging a word I said, as if he was in some kind of trance. I should have just shut down the computer or pulled the plug out of the wall. I don't know why I let him sit there and continue with this stupid exploration. I hate to admit it, but I think I was as curious as he was. He continued to scroll down the site. There were videos. One was named Burning Child, and of course he clicked on it. And what I saw next will haunt me for the rest of my life. I can barely explain what I saw, but I know exactly how I felt seeing it. I felt heartbroken. There was a child who was struggling and screaming against two men who were holding him down. They were pouring some sort of liquid on the child, and then moments later, they lit him on fire. He was screaming in pain. I could see his skin melting from his body. I was literally crying at that point. It even took me a few moments to realize that I was. Those screams were beyond anything I've ever heard. They were so different from what you see in movies. They were so primal and real. As they echoed from my computer, they seemed to relay every sense of pain the small child felt. I could feel vomit rising in my throat. What kind of sickos could do this? Then all of a sudden, a chat box appeared on the screen. A user by the name of Fire435 typed something into the chat box. "Hello there. Are you enjoying this?" It read. We had no idea what to answer. And honestly, I thought it was just one of those fake chat boxes, an ad of sorts. The ones with the bots that chat with you to make you click over to their website. It continued. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Before we could even think of replying, another window popped up above it. This was a live stream video apparently, because it was showing us from my webcam. I didn't even know it was on. The moment we saw ourselves on the video, we panicked and tried to shut down the computer, but the computer was not reacting fast enough. "Why are you trying to leave? Don't you want to be the next spot on our show?" Another message appeared in the chat, followed immediately by my street address, my name, my age, all of my personal data. This was no prank. This was real, and they knew who I was. As I stared at the monitor in horror, it suddenly clicked off, and everything went black. Jack had unplugged the computer, and it had finally shut down, but we didn't have a moment to relax, because Jack's cell phone began to beep. It was a text from a number Jack did not recognize, and it read, "I'm going to find you." Jack blocked that number immediately. We had a short discussion on what the heck just happened. We were scared for our lives. What if this psycho or group of psychos actually found us? And in this situation, we couldn't go to the police or our parents. As far as we knew, it wasn't legal what we just looked at. Months went by without too much happening. I think we both were trying to forget about this experience. But one day, I got an unexpected package. There was no name written on it, but I was very curious, and I went on to see what was inside it. I wish I had never opened that box. The box was full of pictures, those old Polaroid printouts, and each picture depicted a different body part. A picture of a human heart, a picture of just a torso, no limbs, a picture of a child's face with their eyes rolled back in their head. When I saw that face, I dropped the box and I ran up to my room. My parents must have found the box and called the police. When they got here, they asked me many questions, but I didn't tell them anything about going on the dark web. I was still too afraid that I had done something highly illegal. I just couldn't risk it, but I honestly wasn't sure if it was worth lying about. Luckily for me, everything seemed to go back to normal after these experiences, at least for now. I haven't gotten any new messages or packages, and the police haven't contacted us with any further information. But all of this has really shown me something. It's shown me how this world can be evil and cruel. I didn't know that there were people out there like that. For anyone who hasn't been to the deep web, I suggest you quit thinking about it, because you will most definitely be risking your life. Number 2. I bought my dad on eBay. Submitted by Christopher Maxim. I'm only 14 years old, but I'm very tech savvy. I enjoy hacking computers and even building them from time to time. One of my more recent and morbid hobbies has been exploring the deep web. Before you get the wrong idea, I don't go there for the dark stuff. Well, I do, but not the kind of stuff you're thinking about. I explore the deep web for the joy of finding new websites, brand new, off-kilter, bizarre ones. I find them and catalog them for my own personal entertainment. It feels like I'm actively discovering new parts of an ever-growing planet, or at the least, the dark side of one. Despite it being the deep web, most of the websites I've come across are mundane and uninspired. For example, a 9/11 conspiracy site, a dating site for white supremacists, and sites dedicated to assassinating the president. Boring. But then there's the most interesting ones, like a marketplace for selling various serial killers' belongings, a site for worshipping a strange cult called the Clan of the Red Wolf, and a Hitler fanfiction site, and I'm talking violent, hypersexual fanfiction, to name a few. These are the kinds of sites that either pique my interest or make me laugh, giving them a spot in my catalog of oddities. One day, while on my usual hunt for the unusual, I came across a site called Parent Snatcher. The layout was overly simple and looked more like someone's Tumblr page rather than a deep web website. But I wanted to see what it had to offer. In reading its contents, I found little to placate my hunger for the strange and obscene. It was just a list of pronouns and numbers, coupled with links to eBay listings on the surface web selling furniture. Her, 37, eBay listing says a love seat for $14,356. Him, 28, the eBay listing saying sofa for $11,467. Another one said her, 42. The eBay listing said drapes, $12,569. There was a him, 40. The eBay listing said ceiling fan for $29.97. And a her, 32, with the eBay link stating dining room set for $29.97 as well. This setup confused me. Doing a little more digging, I found various number sequences embedded into the background of the website. Being a fan of encryption myself, I wondered if it might be a code of some sort. I took down the series of numbers and ran it through one of my mini code-breaking programs that I had on my computer. After an hour or so, it popped out a message. Welcome to Parent Snatcher. Need a new mom or dad? Not satisfied with the one you have? Well, you've come to the right place. Follow a her listing for a mother unit and a him listing for a father unit. Ages are included in the description. Once payment is received by the eBay user, we will send you your new parent. All of our human products come with a lifetime guarantee. We monitor the bonding process 24/7 for quality control. They are equipped with a tracking chip and video surveillance, making it impossible for them to escape. We here at Parent Snatcher desire your full satisfaction above all else. Enjoy. Now that was obviously weird. I've certainly never seen anything like that on the deep web. This was definitely getting a special place in my catalog, whether it was fake or not. After saving the site into my collection, I wondered, what if it actually worked? This is going to sound stupid, but I always wanted a dad. It's been me and my mom for as long as I can remember. She says he left when I was young, but I don't recall him ever being there. As such, I would often fantasize about him returning home, seeing me all grown up, and wanting to be a part of my life again. Like I said, it's stupid. Still, I really wanted to know if this site worked. I tried 1,000 different search engines and asked around on forums on both the deep web and the surface web. Not a single mention of Parent Snatcher was anywhere. I finally ripped my eyes from my computer monitor, and I looked over at my clock. It was nearly 3 in the freaking morning. I'd been searching for information on this one site for several hours, and for one reason or another, I just couldn't let it go. Maybe it was my need for a father figure, or perhaps it was the sleep deprivation. Either way, I found myself walking upstairs to my mom's bedroom. Once there, I snuck past her, asleep on the bed, and I reached into her purse located on one of her nightstands. I grabbed her wallet and quietly walked back downstairs to my room. Lights are going up, snow is falling down, there's a feeling of goodwill around town. I picked out one of her credit cards, followed the cheapest dad listing on Parent Snatcher to the surface web, and clicked on the Buy It Now option for a ceiling fan. I typed in all of the credit card information required, and then I paused for a moment. I was about to not only break my mom's trust and spend a boatload of her money, but I was also doing something potentially dangerous. What if the man I purchased wasn't nice? What would my mom say or do when he got there? What if there would be no man at all? What if the site was just a carefully orchestrated scam designed into swindling unsuspecting children out of their parents' money? I asked myself these questions, but they barely made a dent in my curiosity. I hit enter and finalized the purchase. After sneaking the card back into my mom's purse, and without being noticed, I waited. Days passed. Those days became weeks. I had to put up with my mom arguing on the phone with her credit card company, as well as eBay, over the mysterious $3,000 purchase I made with her card. She never once suspected me of doing the deed, even venting with me about it from time to time. That made me feel guilty. My guilt, however, was no match for my excitement. I could not wait to see if Parent Snatcher was legitimate. The weeks that passed eventually turned into a month, and that's when I started becoming wary of the site's claims. I began to accept the fact that I was just a dumb kid, pulled by a master con artist. I was left feeling hopeless, and like an idiot, I had been fantasizing about a scenario in which the site not only worked, but sent me a nice man to be my dad. He would meet my mom, and they would both fall in love. We would be a family again. I knew the chances were slim, but I still hoped. I was a fool. One night while on my computer, searching for more deep web gems, I heard a loud bang at the front door. A burglar, perhaps. I jumped up from my computer and grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed. I was ready to fight off any would-be intruder. After getting into a fighting stance, I heard someone shuffling around outside my bedroom. My adrenaline was through the roof. I stood my ground and wound up the bat, ready to swing. My bedroom door suddenly swung open. It was a man wearing all black, including a black ski mask. He stood there, looked me up and down, apparently sizing me up, before finally speaking. "Are you the one who placed an order with Parent Snatcher?" Struck with confusion, I nodded. The man then suddenly bolted in my direction and grabbed me. He put his hand over my mouth and pulled me out of my room. I struggled, but he was too strong. Just before he could get me out of my house, I attempted to bite his hand through the leather glove he was wearing. I clenched my teeth as hard as I could and managed to get a reaction. The man groaned in pain. That's when I was able to wiggle my way free and run towards the stairs, all the while screaming at the top of my lungs for my mom to wake up. But the man caught up quick and grabbed me again. But my cries for help were effective. My mom showed up at the top of the stairs, just in time to see what was going on. My mom screamed and leapt down the flight of stairs, faster than I've seen any person move in my life. She began bashing the guy's head in with her fist, making it nearly impossible for him to hold on to me. He threw some punches back, but I wasn't going to let him get away with laying his dirty hands on my mother. I stretched my leg back as far as it would go, and I kicked him as hard as I could in his groin, and I watched as he fell to the floor. He still tried to fight back, but my mom and I had the upper hand. Eventually, he ran for the door and fled our home. It's been a few weeks since that man broke into our house. I can only guess that he really did work for Parent Snatcher, but the site wasn't what I hoped it was. It seemed that its goal was not only to make money, but also to kidnap children. Once they have a billing address, they probably canvass the area for a few weeks to make sure the house in question actually harbors a child or teenager. I didn't figure it all out on my own. If I was able to think that far ahead, I wouldn't have wound up in this mess to begin with. I ended up telling my mom the truth, as well as the police. They figured out the rest. Unfortunately, the site was taken down, and the perpetrators were never apprehended. The cops are still on the lookout. They offered my mom and I a police detail and new security system. So in spite of the ordeal, we still sleep well. What would Parent Snatcher have done if they had actually captured me? The police wouldn't offer me insight on this, but I'm sure they told my mom. I already have a good guess anyway. More than likely, I would have been integrated into some kind of child trafficking ring, perhaps sold off to the highest bidder on another deep web website. From there, I'm sure you can gather what would have happened. Lucky for me, I wasn't captured. So all in all, I've learned a lot from nearly being kidnapped, and one thing is certain. I will never visit the deep web again for as long as I live. Number 3. There's no place for innocence on the deep web. Submitted by Kevin L. I'm a 20-year-old guy living in Quebec, Canada. The story I'm about to share with you might be a bit too detailed or too offensive for your liking. This story happened on a summer night of 2016. I was relaxing at home when I stumbled upon Reddit posts about the dark web. Soon I was very intrigued, and I had to know more. I looked it up online. Doing some research, I found how to get on the deep web. After an hour or two of getting everything together and being sure that I was set up okay, I was finally ready for the unknown. Or so I thought. I started by your typical deep web wiki and started clicking every link one by one. I was nervous and cautious about clicking anything, as it could always lead to terrible things, images and pictures that are not only disturbing, but very, very illegal. Honestly, I just wanted to find some weird and creepy stuff, not scar myself for life. After a few hours of digging around, I finally hit something very interesting. A working and non-shady adult site with lots of links and a really detailed introduction to the website. The intro was simple, telling you that there are a lot of links to some hidden adult websites with content that would not be allowed on the internet, since not everyone shared the same fetishes. It also stated there were other links that contained some stuff people would call messed up. I wish I had never been curious enough to click those. The first few links were adult websites for BDSM and other brutal stuff that included violence and even rape. The actors knew that it would be something intense, but it's like these extreme horror houses. You might be a fan of horror, but there's always a limit to what you like. It was messed up to see, but it wasn't that bad. I then tried the links for the messed up content. If the creator of the website thinks the BDSM stuff wasn't messed up, I was kind of scared to see his definition of disturbing. As I entered the site, everything looked alright, I guess. The creator introduced himself as a sex doll maker. He was showing pictures of his work, and honestly, it was amazing. The dolls looked almost human. They were not creepy or anything like that, as you would see with normal dolls. They had so many details necessary to make them look realistic, but nothing too much to make it look creepily real. There was a bit more text down the page, and then he showed 2 pictures that have been forever burned into my mind. He showed pictures of 2 dolls that were apparently inspired by his nieces. They were labeled as ultra-realistic sex dolls, based on his 8 and 12-year-old nieces. Side by side were the dolls and 2 skull pictures of the girls in question. There was no mistake. Those dolls were exact replicas. I was disgusted out of my mind when I saw those pictures. They looked so real. The only thing that convinced me that these dolls weren't actually the little girls in those pictures were the metal skeletons he showed in a step-by-step process in creating the dolls. For my own sake, as soon as I was sure, or at least partially sure, that those dolls were just dolls, I exited Tor, and I erased every trace that had been on the deep web from my PC. I was shocked for the longest time. I couldn't process the information of what I'd just seen. Some sick pervert out there made a perfect replica of his underage nieces to have fun with and sell them to other sick individuals that were into this kind of stuff. I was just looking for weird or creepy things. I think I got what I was looking for. Since then, I've been on tour a few times, and fortunately, I can only find websites dedicated to cooking with weed, and other websites about illuminated people that say alien Jesus came and visited them. To every one of you out there, the deep web is not a place for you. It's a place that is filled with creepy and disturbing people that do weird and disturbing stuff. Seriously, if you want to preserve your innocence, do not go on the deep web, or else you might find something you regret ever laying an eye on. Number 4. The Knocking Man. Submitted by Josh. I'm a 15-year-old guy, and I'm about 6 feet. I'm built, so I'm not exactly someone you want to pick a fight with, and I also don't scare too easily. Until my experience with the Knocking Man. It all started well over a year ago, when I was going through some creepy sites in the dark web. Now, let me tell you, the dark web is not a place you should ever go on. I came across some rather strange videos. There was a dark room in them, lit by a single candle. I remember seeing a man walk through a door into this room. He wore all black, and his face was even covered in black paint. All you could really see were the big whites of his wide eyes gazing at you, as if he was staring straight into your soul. I remember seeing just barely his lips moving. He was whispering something that I could not hear. Being very curious, I turned my laptop up to see what he was saying, and the moment I did, he ran at my camera, and I fell back in my chair. When I got back up, the man was laughing in the video, an evil demonic laugh, like nothing I'd ever heard before. All at once, in the middle of the laughing, it stopped, and my computer froze up. Then the laptop just turned off and stayed off for a couple of minutes. When I turned on my computer again, everything seemed normal until I got to my desktop. My background had been replaced with an all-black one, save for some text in the middle that read, "You have been chosen." I didn't understand how that even happened. Maybe it was just a virus that was meant to prank people. But every time I tried to change my background after that, the computer wouldn't let me. Things would be grayed out that weren't before, and the background simply wouldn't be removed. Honestly, it creeped me out so bad, I ended up grabbing my screwdriver, and I took the battery out of my laptop. And ever since then, I haven't touched it. After about a month or so, when the things I saw on the dark web that night were almost forgotten, I began to hear the very faintest knocking at my windows every night. Knocking that sounded deliberately soft. Every time I'd look at the window, there wouldn't be anything there, and I thought I was losing my mind. The knocking happened so often that it really began to affect my life. My social life was gone, I was getting paranoid, and my grades began to fail. I started to argue a lot with my parents, all because this knocking kept me up at night and made me scared for my life. But could I tell anyone about it? I don't know, but maybe I should have. Like I said before, I would look out the window when I heard it, but I would see nothing. And when I would get back in bed, the knocking would just come again. To me, this was impossible. The only way you could reach my bedroom window would be to use a ladder. So there was no way you could knock on my window, climb down the ladder, remove the ladder and hide it, then put the ladder back up and knock again, without ever being seen. It just didn't make any sense. Now, I do need to say that I live in the middle of nowhere. My nearest neighbors live about a mile out, so there were only a few streetlights. Most of the time, the only light came from the faint glow of the moon outside. After 6 months or so of this knocking, I decided to find out who or what this was. I saved up some money, cleaning cars around town in the summer, and I bought a cheap digital camera. I placed it outside, pointing at my window. It was well hidden, and you could only notice it if you knew where I put it. When bedtime rolled around that night, I crawled into bed like normal, and I waited until the knocking started. But to my surprise, there was no knocking that night. For the first time in so long, the knocking was gone. So I walked over to my window to check on the position of the camera and to just check how things looked out there. When I opened my curtains, all I could see was darkness, save for two white eyes that were staring back at me. I quickly jumped back, tripping over a stool behind me and landing on my back in the floor. The next time I looked up at the window, all I could see was the moon in the sky, and everything was back to normal. I don't know what's happening to me, and I don't know who that is that I saw that night on the dark web, but more than ever, I wish that I could go back and stop myself from exploring that website.
Stains are certain. So is the power of Tide, with 50% more cleaning power.
And number 5, The Missing Kid, submitted by Juvenile. There was a time in high school just a few years ago when everyone went crazy over the deep or dark web. People were listening to stories about it, looking up how to get into the dark web themselves, all because of this short craze. From the sound of it, it scared me. I had great grades and I planned on having a bright future, so I didn't even want to go near something that could get me in trouble with the FBI. There was one kid in my class that year named Skylar. Skylar was a quiet kid, someone I don't think I'd ever talked to before. One day though, I don't know if it was because I looked approachable or what, Skylar actually sat next to me just before class, and he began to tell me something with an excited grin on his face. You know about the deep web, right? He asked, sounding like he could barely hold back from saying more. Well, yeah, I replied, nodding. Well, I found something last night. I have to tell someone about this, you know? He began. His teeth were nearly chattering. I leaned in, honestly wanting to know more. So, there's this cult on the dark web. A cult called Alchemy of Osiris. They claim to know the secret to eternal life. I sat back in my chair again, rolling my eyes as I did. There's no such thing. No, listen, he continued. There's a local group of members in our town. They said they would show me. They said the cost isn't too deep. I wouldn't trust anyone online who talks like that, I warned him. It's legit, man. I'll prove it to you, he said, just before walking back to his desk. Well, that was the first and last conversation I ever had with Skylar. Because Skylar didn't come back to school the next day, or the rest of the year for that matter. Oddly enough, the teacher of the class we shared never bothered to mention what happened to him, and soon Skylar himself became a bit of a legend around the school. I was never asked about the conversation I had with him, and I've never told. I'm afraid that I know too much as it is. I'm scared that Skylar didn't just disappear. I'm scared that he's lying dead out there somewhere. Humans like to pretend that their nature is good, that underneath it all, people are genuinely good-hearted. But throughout all of history, and still to this day, humans have practiced the most evil things. Human slavery, sex trafficking, cannibalism, and torture fetishism. Humans are terrible people. It seems like it's really just a matter of time before one of two things happens to you. 1, you can no longer ignore your evil nature. Or 2, the most evil people find you. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to send us your subway stories at deathbyfear.com. Be here for the live stream this Friday at 5 p.m. Central for lots of creepy fun. Thanks. Click that subscribe button and the notification bell to never miss another spooky episode. The dark web is said to be a terrifying place. But is it really the online haunting ground that movies and some people claim it is? Or is it something more tame? Well, either way, there will always exist people in this world who want nothing more than to terrorize and even harm others. So it's only natural that the dark web could be another potential breeding ground for these kinds of people. Here are 5 allegedly true, scary dark web stories. If you want your story to appear on this channel, Go to darknessprevails.org and share it today. Dark Web and the Mystery Box by Christopher K. Paxton. Recently on YouTube, I've been seeing a whole lot of videos of kids and childlike adults opening up so-called dark web mystery boxes, and it reminds me all too well of the most horrifying experience of my life. I was in the 9th grade. I was the shortest guy in my grade, and I'd never had a girlfriend. When hormones are raging, everything that shouldn't matter mattered, and everything that mattered to me was not going anywhere. Now that I've grown up, gotten friends, and actually talked to people like me, I know how common this was, to be a quiet, insecure boy who would do anything to belong somewhere. It was when I was at my most vulnerable that I met Joseph. He was in the same grade as me, and physically was the opposite of me. Tall, loud, absurdly skinny no matter how much he ate, which he said was caused by a thyroid issue or something. Joseph was by no means charming or charismatic, but to a boy like me who was never approached in a positive way by his peers, Joseph was a godsend. He was someone I could finally talk to, joke with, just someone to call friend. But beggars can't be choosers. Joseph was a horrible person. He had a fondness for practical jokes and pranks that went too far. You know, the kind that don't just surprise people but actually hurt or injure or scar them mentally. For example, one day when Joseph and I were eating lunch in the cafeteria, I noticed he was watching a kid named Hector. Hector was our school's notable special needs kid. He was usually quiet, often asking for hugs rather than holding normal conversations. Beyond that, Hector would often keep to himself. At one point, he tugged at a nearby teacher's shirt and requested to be taken to the bathroom. As the teacher and Hector walked away, they left his tray of stromboli and green beans on the lunch table. I saw a vile grin stretch across Joseph's face. Then he got up, pulling something from his pocket. He walked over to Hector's tray and began to spread something across the inside of the stromboli bread. When Joseph came back, he stifled a laugh and put his finger to his mouth facing me, signaling me to be quiet. I lowered my head, but on the inside I was panicking. What had he done? Hector soon came back and immediately dug into his stromboli. It only took 10 seconds for the screaming to begin. The teachers freaked out. Hector struggled to breathe, and my eyes were tearing up, heart pounding, wondering what I should do. Then Joseph grabbed my shoulder and showed me an empty 4-ounce bottle. Dude, he giggled. You ever wonder what would happen if someone drank super glue? My mouth was agape. He had fed Hector 4 ounces of super glue. After being rushed to the hospital, it was apparent that the glue had sealed up Hector's throat almost entirely. Luckily, Hector survived. Despite Joseph doing something so disgusting, I was too afraid to go against him, and also too afraid to lose him. Joseph didn't get in trouble for this either. Somehow, no one saw him walk over to Hector's tray. He got away with it. Now that you understand how Joseph was, you will understand the terrors of my experience. On an especially warm autumn weekend, Joseph wanted me to spend the night with him. I asked my mother and father, got the okay, and was dropped off at his place on 7 p.m. that Friday. That night, we walked around the dilapidated neighborhood, Joseph talking about how much he disliked his neighbors, while occasionally barking back at the dogs beyond the fences that thought we were intruders. At around 10 p.m., we came back to his house. His parents were in bed by then, so we locked ourselves in his room and hunkered around the light of his laptop, searching up conspiracy theories and wondering what mysteries will be solved in our lifetimes. It was on that night that we discovered something called the dark web for the very first time. We decided we had to venture into it. After reading an article we had stumbled upon concerning the vastness of the deep web and dark web, Joseph was immediately intrigued. But he misunderstood it. He thought that all he had to do was Google up disturbing forum topics and keywords. He assumed the dark web was just the creepy corners of the internet. But then he found a couple of guides and the Tor browser. Staying quiet, I sat behind and watched Joseph, watching him install the browser with excitement. As he followed the two different how to access the dark web guides from around the web, his hand movements became giddy and frantic. I had only seen him like this a few times before, and one of those times was when he watched Hector get pulled inside the ambulance. I was getting tired by then, and by midnight I had cuddled up in a beanbag, curled myself into a quilt, and began to doze off. I fell asleep, watching Joseph's smiling face illuminated solely by the laptop screen that he was so focused on. I woke up in the middle of the night. My bladder was full, so I hurried to the bathroom to do my business so I could get back to sleep. Once I was done, I walked clumsily and sleepily back to Joseph's room. It was then that I noticed he had fallen asleep facing the laptop, which was still shining in his face. Curious, I walked over and turned the screen to face me. There I saw a single full-screen window. It looked like a normal browser, akin to Mozilla Firefox at the time, if I had to compare it to something. But I did notice the URL was different. It ended in .onion.2, a domain name I had never seen before. The window itself showed a direct message conversation. Apparently, Joseph had his username entered as SatanKid397, which was about right. But the person he was talking to called himself -WX-. I scrolled through the conversation. The two of them had stayed up talking for hours, and it appeared that Joseph had fallen asleep mid-conversation. But it was the details of the conversation that were quite disturbing. It started off with Joseph asking, "This can't be real. Too easy." And WX replied, "You're new here, aren't you?" Joseph then asked, "So, how much exactly? And how do I know it's for real?" "You'll know when it's done," WX answered. "I'll send the box to your door, no worries. You can pay after you see the box." Yeah, right, I thought. This guy doesn't know Joseph very well then. I scrolled forward in the conversation, eager to know what in the world Joseph was trying to purchase from this guy. The next line that I saw made my skin crawl. It was from WX. "I can do that, but it'll be more expensive. Legs are thicker and much more difficult to remove." Remove legs? I scrolled back up, looking for messages from Joseph to find out what was going on. Then I found just the right one, or the wrong one. It said, "How about the leg? I don't think he'll need it. Just imagining the pain and fear he would experience. Much better than actually putting him out of his misery. Mr. Pickery deserves something worse than blackness." Mr. Pickery was the name of Joseph's homeroom teacher. I read for a solid hour, not even aware that Joseph catching me reading such a conversation could be dangerous for me. I read until I was sure of it. Joseph had supposedly found someone who took out hits on other people, but offered flexible services if the customer had the cash. In this case, Joseph was planning on having Mr. Pickery's life ruined, and I knew that he didn't have the money for it. WX was asking for $125,000, claiming that leaving the person alive was even more risky for him, and therefore cost much more. But what he didn't know was Joseph's family lived paycheck to paycheck, and Joseph was 16 years old. It didn't matter, though, if he would go through with it or not, if he actually wanted it or not. What mattered to me was the fact that Joseph was involving himself with extremely dangerous people. I didn't believe one bit that this WX person actually would do something like this. I thought WX was just a liar trying to get money off of people. Even still, someone that desperate for money was dangerous, and I did not want to be a part of it anymore. So that night, before anyone else woke up, I got my shoes on and left Joseph's home. Walking the few blocks back to my house, back to actual safety and sanity. I'd never felt so sick before. In the morning, I had several texts from Joseph, who was a bit upset that I had ditched out on him and didn't even tell him. But I was going to be straight with Joseph this time. I told him I read the chat log on his laptop and that I didn't want to hang around with someone like him anymore. He tried to laugh it off, say that it was just a joke. I told him even if it was too far. Again. Joseph and I were no longer friends. I avoided him at school. I blocked his number. I tried to move on. But when I did catch a glimpse of Joseph across the room or hallway, he wore the most frightening expression. He was more mad than I'd ever seen him before. And to be honest, I was afraid of him for a while. Afraid that he'd do something to get back at me. And it turns out I was right to be afraid. But it was not what I was expecting. One day I walked home alone from school as usual. I entered through the side of the house, made myself a sandwich, then went out the front door as I always did to check the mail. There I saw a package at our doorstep. It was small and unmarked, appearing to have been hand-delivered and not at all sent through the post office. I brought it inside and quickly opened it, my curiosity driving me. There was a ton of toilet paper which had been used as packing paper, and underneath that there was a very thick and compact ball of toilet paper. As there was nothing else in the box, I assumed that the object I was looking for was wrapped up in this little white ball. As I unwrapped it, I felt a sickening feeling rising up in my stomach. There were red blotches on the toilet paper that grew more common and apparent the more I unraveled the ball. Then, it all happened at once. The ball came to an end, and the momentum of it unraveling caused something thin and long to fall out, slapping itself sickeningly on the kitchen counter. I screamed. It was a finger. I ran to the neighbor's house and called the cops. Soon my parents were there and had me in their arms. I was beginning to feel okay again, but far from normal. I wanted to know whose finger that was. I had a really bad feeling it was Mr. Pickery's finger, that it was Joseph's way of showing me just how real the dark web conversation had been, to get back at me. It turns out it wasn't Mr. Pickery's, though. Actually, it was Joseph's finger. Being upset by me calling off our friendship like that, and having stayed up all night drinking his dad's booze while chatting with more people on the dark web, who ridiculed him and taunted him into actually performing his bluff, Joseph did it. Joseph had taken it off of himself. Then he put it in a box when he was sober and delivered it right to my front door. Joseph was badly messed up in the head. They were able to reattach his finger, sure, but he lost 40% of its feeling, and Joseph was then locked up in a mental institution until he was 20. I was very close to Joseph, having been desperate for a friend, but sometimes being alone is better, safer. If Joseph was messed up enough to be willing to harm himself like that, just to freak me out, There's no telling what else he'd